you can't, because there's a video, can't say, okay, bring in more chairs.
That is correct. Okay. Zog the Heilige Mishnah. Beishamai Oymen. Beishamai said, you cannot do Miyun, Ella Arusas. So we know the halacha is if a girl is a Yosayma, and therefore there's no one who could marry her off because her father is the only person who has the koyach to marry her off. We don't want her to be hefker. So because of that, we allow, thank you very much, Spencer. We allow Midrabanon, we allow her mother and her brothers to marry her off. However, since it's not a real marriage, it's only Dirabanon, until she becomes a Gedolah, she can say, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. So Bishami says that only an Arusa could make Miyun, not a Nesua. Basila says, Arusa is Nesuas. Even in Nesua is allowed to do Miyun. Thank you so much, Hansi. Bishami Oimim, Bebal. Let's see what the box says. Bebal. Ubisil Oimim. Bebal Ubiyam. Bishami says, even if a woman could only do Miyun when she's in Arusa, she could also only do Yibum to her husband. But if her husband dies without children, and now she's falling to Yibum, to the husband's brother, she cannot do Miyun. It still says she can even do Yibum on the Yovim. She could say, I don't want to marry you, and that'll make her go free. Miyun could only be done in front of her husband. Even if he's not around, you could do Miyun. Bishami says it has to be done in Besman. Sai bebezin and Mishaloi bebezin. Amr lehem Besil leBeishamai. Besil asked Beishamai, Mima enes v'katana afilu dalad vehipam. Let's say she makes Miyun to one husband, and then they marry her off again, or she marries off again. She could do Miyun again, even 5 times. She could do Miyun to 5 husbands. Amr lehem Beishamai. Beishamai said, no. Ein b'noi Yisrael hefker. B'noi Yisrael are not hefker. Ela mima enes, she could do Miyun only once, and then umam tenes at shetagdil, she has to wait till she becomes a gedolah, where she can get married with a raisa, v'timoyin, then she'll do Miyun, v'sinase, and then she could get married again. So of course the Gemara is going to ask, if she did Miyun already when she's a Kana, why does she have to do Miyun again when she's a Gedolah? Gemara is going to explain this. Gavaltik. Zog to Gemara. Amr Rabbi Yehuda Amr Shmuel. My timer, the Beishamai. What's the svara of Beishamai who says that a Nesua cannot make Miyun? Why shouldn't she be able to make Miyun? She's still a Tana, it's still only Midrabanan. Zog to Gemara, Lefish ain't Tanai b'Nesu. We don't allow ever a Tanai. A Tanai never works by Nesuin. And Rashi says, Shein Tanai moyel b'Nesuin. A Tanai does not help by Nesuin. Shal Gedolah. If this was an adult woman, a Tanai never works to disqualify Nesuin. Why is that? Even if there's a Tanai b'Shas Kedushin, so a man said, I'm only marrying you almanas that you make me a coffee every day. And he made such a Kedushin, when it comes time to make the Nesuin on his wife, and to have Bia and have Chuppah, at that point, he's Moichel. He's Moichel all the Tanoim. And he automatically waives all the Tanoim because of the Chibas Bia. Since he wants to be boiler, he waives all the Tanoim, so it should be 100% marriage. And therefore the kedushin will be chal. The amrit nesua katanati mine. If we would say that by miyun it does work, lo yadi inchi, people wouldn't understand that this woman is walking free, mishum katnasu, because she's still a minor and there's miyun happening here. Ella, what they're going to think is that she's an adult and she's walking free. Amri tanaya havalei b'nesuin. They'll assume there was a tanai that was not fulfilled, and therefore she's walking free. But also l'meimar yesh tanai b'nisui gedola. They're going to say that a tanai works even for the nisuin of a gedola. The nesua timayin, if we would allow a nesua to make miyun, also l'meimar, people are going to mistakenly think yesh tanai b'nisui. That is why, according to Beis Shammai, you could not do miyun on the nesua. Good morning, Shmuel. How about nichnas al chuppah v'loy nivela? What if there's no bia? Now, if there's no bia, in fact, then a tanai should work because there's no chibas bia. It's only the chibas bia that makes the husband waive all of the tanai. But it was only nichnas al chuppah v'loy nivela. There shouldn't be a problem of the tanai being bottled by nesua, and therefore we should also allow miyun. But in fact, chuppah also prevents miyun. Michael Maimer, how are you going to explain why a woman who was nichnas or the chuppah why she may not do miyun according to Beis Shammai? Because people don't have tanai in the chuppah either. And Rashi says, "L'vishein tanai moil b'chuppah v'amit ketana shenichnas al chuppah v'le'nivela tamayin." If we'll allow miyun on the ketana, those nichnas al chuppah, amri tana havalu. People are going to say that there was a tanai in the kedushin and in the sun v'aslameimer yesh tanai b'chuppah, and people are going to also say that there's a tanai b'chuppah, and the halacha is you cannot make a tanai even b'chuppah. Okay, but what about even a lesser level? Masar av lo shluchei abal. What if she became an arusa, and then the Baal sent his shluchim to pick her up, to bring her to his home, and the father has given her over to those shluchim. Zokt Rashi, Masar av lo shluchei abal. Michael Maimer. How are you going to explain in that case why miyun is no longer possible? Inami asilamemer tanai moil b'mesira. Even if you're going to tell me that if we allow miyun to work, so then we'll say that the tanai can disqualify the marriage even after the father gave her over to the shluchim of the Baal. That's not a problem. Shaper Kamri. It's good that they're saying that. Shara ein kan chiba. The name of achl l'tanoi de kadush. In fact, Tanai does work. Tanai does work by Masar Av lo shluchei abal. So what is the problem? Why miyun wouldn't work if it's Masar Av lo shluchei abal? Michael Maimer, how are you going to explain why a woman cannot do miyun if she was already nimsa lo shluchei abal? Zokt Rashi, as an aside, Hai Masar Av lav dafka. We cannot be referring actually to the father giving her over to Shluchei Abal, because if the father was alive, it would be a Kedushin Deraisa. And Miyun for sure wouldn't work. Miyun wouldn't work at all. The Av Zakoi Kedushin Bita. And the Av has a schus to be Mekadesh's daughter, and it would be a Kedushin Deraisa. Ve'ein Miyun. Miyun wouldn't work. Ella, in our case, what it would mean is be a Yosy Shekachua Ima Vachel. A Yosy whose mother or brother married her off, where it's only a kedushin derabbanan. V'hachi kamar masar avlu shluchei abal. The kaimel of Ksubis the nisuininu in the Gemara Ksubis, it tells us that we consider a girl that was given over to the shluchei habal. We consider her a nesua already. Utekavasa hacha. So the parallel case by miyun would be masrua achin lushluchin. If the brothers gave her over to shluchin. Have a nesuin, that would be considered nesuin. And we know the halacha is, according to Beis Shammai, Miyun can no longer be done. So how are you going to explain why can the Miyun not be done? You can't say it's because a Tanai, people will think that a Tanai ben Nesuin works, because in fact a Tanai in this case does work. A Tanai will be Mevatel to Kedushin even though it was already Masar Avl Shluch Eval. Zok to Gemara, you know why over there you cannot make Miyun? Because of a loy plug rabban. In fact, no Gzeira is appropriate over there, because in fact there a Tanai would work. But it's a Gzeira rabban of a loy plug. Bein Nesuin and Nesuin. Once we say that a Nesua cannot do Miyun, it applies to all of the different cases that we consider Nesua, even if not in all those cases would there be a Gzeira that someone will come to think that a Tanai works by Nesua. Ubesil, who holds that in fact Tana may do Miyun, in fact that a Nesua means. The fact that they still hold that a Nesua may do Yibum, how does he understand it? May do Yadi, the Nesua Ketana Drabban. There's no welcome to make this Gzeira. If a girl walks away from a marriage, even though she's a Nesua, people know this is a minor and she made Miyun. And therefore, they're not going to confuse this with a Gedola who's married Midaraisa, who had a Tanai in their Kedusha. So there's no need to make this Gzeira. So that was the first shot. The first shot in why Beis Shammai prohibits a Nesua from making Miyun is it's a Gzeira that people will then think that a Tanai works in Nesuin, when we know that because of the Chivas Bia, he actually waives all of his Tanai. Rabbi Yosef, Damri Tavayu, time of the Beis Shammai, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef offered another way to explain Beis Shammai. So the first explanation was from Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel. Now, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef is offering an explanation why in Nesua cannot do it. Time of the Beis Shammai, a person won't want to ruin Bia that he made. So if he did not make Nesuin yet on this katana, he only made Erisin, so big deal. If Miyun is done, it undoes it, and he's back where he started from. But if he already made Nesuin, means he was boiled this girl. If he was boiled this girl and then she nullifies the marriage with Miyun, it's going to make his Bia retroactively into a Bias Nus. And nobody wants to put himself into a position where a Bia that he's making would be a Bias Nus. And because of that, he's not going to ever marry a Katan in the first place. So the whole reason why we made it the Khan of Miyun is so that the brother and the mother can marry the child off. Why? Because we don't want this child to be Hefker. We want her to be married. This way she won't be Hefker. If because of Miyun, people are going to avoid marrying Katanos, well, then you've just ruined the entire Takana. So therefore, we cannot allow Miyun once Nesuin happened already. Otherwise, people are going to refrain from marrying Katanos. Okay. What if it was only nichnas al chuppah, but there was no bia? So over there's no chashash of bilas nus, so he wouldn't mind. Michael Amar.
Eventually tell us they still reply to that. Why he allows it by the sleep?
Yes. So nichnas al chuppah v'nivla Michael Amar. There is no bia, so there's nothing to become a bias nus. Zok to Gemara lo nichelated to have a chuppah di isura. Rashi says, chuppah di isura, the be'ilas nus. He doesn't want his chuppah to be a chuppah of a bias nus. He doesn't want to do a chuppah on a woman if it's going to be retroactively disqualified because of her. What about the case of Masar Avlos Luche Abal, where Beis Shammai also prohibits Miyun from occurring at that point? And there's no shaila of bilas bias or even his chuppah beser. Michael Memer, Zoktamar loy plug rabbanim, the same svara that we said in the first round. It's a loy plug. So now to answer Chaim Chi's question, and what's Beis Hillel's position? Or Beis Hillel, even the Ika Kedushin Ksuba, since he did Kedushin Kalacha, he wrote her a Ksuba Kalacha. yes, retroactively the Nisuin becomes Nisbaka. But since it was done in Ganzen kosher, in Ganzen kalocha, in Ganzen in an appropriate fashion to Ksuba, loy also lememar the bilase bilisnus. People aren't going to consider this a bilisnus. This is not something that's going to concern people. Even though his Nisuin becomes nullified, his Nisuin and Kedushin becomes nullified, he's not going to look at it like that made his being into bilisnus, because when he did it by the book. So there's no such gzeira. At the time, it was not a business.
And even now, it's not a business.
Well, now come the right. It was a beer, but it wasn't a kedusha. If Miyun breaks it, so it makes it ice marriage.
Then why is Beis Hill telling us what people talk about? That's not important.
That's very important because the whole reason why.
No, but okay, so that's very important.
Because he's going to refrain from marrying a katana.
So even though that people are not going to consider it, but if halacha considers it a business, so then that's a problem for Beis Hill.
No, I don't think so because it's happens knows that the Rabbanan want you to not they don't want you to do it, but they want you to marry the katana, so they shouldn't be after. That was part of the code that they made. They want katanas to get married, even though it's possible that your bia l'mafreya was a biasnos. It doesn't mean it was a bia of Isser. It was sanctioned by the Rabban. They want these things to happen, even though there's a risk that it's possible that it will come out that there was not a bias for marriage.
To me, the difference between not a bias isser but a biasnus. What is a biasnus?
A biasnus means a bia not in marriage, an out of wedlock bia. So this is the heklims of having an out of wedlock bia that's sanctioned by the Rabbanan. Rav Papa Amar, time of the Beis Shammai. So we have two reasons so far. A, it's a gzeira. People will think that the Tanai works by Nisuin. B is people are going to avoid marrying a katana if it's possible that her bia will be a biasnos. And Rav Papa says it's mishum peri. It's because of the paris that the husband eats from the wife's nichsim alone. And you know what? You know what else is because of peri? Time of the Beis Hill mishum peri. And the reason why Beis Hill holds that Miyun does work by Nesua is also because of paris. Let's elaborate. Time of the Beis Shammai mishum peri is the amrit Nesua to mine. If we say that a Nesua could do Miyun, so what the husband is going to do is while he's married to her, before she makes Miyun, he's going to raid the fields to get whatever he can get before she could, on her own, stop or break the marriage. Therefore, shamit va'achalu mina. Why? The safe l'meik p'kaima. Normally, a man knows that he's safe. His wife can't just walk away. He has to give her a get. But Miyun gives a woman a way to walk out of the marriage. So he's afraid at any minute she'll walk out of the marriage. He'll lose his chus to eat the peiros from her nichsim aluk. So he's going to raid them now, which is going to damage the nichsim aluk. However, Beis Hill says Adarab, even the armor to mine, since we say she could do Miyun, so he's always under threat that her family will not approve of how he is treating her nichsim aluk, and they're going to encourage her to get rid of him. So therefore, to the contrary, it'll keep him on his toes to make sure that he's going to treat the nichsim aluk with the greatest respect, with the greatest care, so that her family shouldn't tell her to dump him. And therefore, ashbuche mashbichu, he'll be extra careful to protect the nichsim aluk, because Sovar, he thinks the Eloi aitzila kreve umafkalamini. Because if he's not taking care of the nichsim aluk, he's letting those fields go to pot, and he's raiding those fields, her family's going to tell her, do Miyun, because he's going to mess up your nuchas. So that's the third svara. It's all about protecting her nichsim aluk. Rav Amar, and Rav has a fourth svara. Hainu time of the Beis Shammai. The reason why Beis Shammai says you could not do Miyun on the Nesua is because the main party, the main wedding party, the main Suda is done for the Nesua, not for the Chuppah. Shein Adam Terech Pasuda Mafsida. Nobody wants to pay $50,000 for a beautiful wedding, and then the whole wedding becomes bottled. So because of that, if we allow Miyun, he says, I'm not going to risk making a big, beautiful wedding because it might all go to pot. So therefore, I'm not marrying her. I'm not marrying her until I know that the money that I'm paying the caterer is going to be a worthwhile investment. They're both happy, even though it's possible that this marriage will be overturned. They're still happy to make a big party anyway, because for the time being, it's good that there should be a rumor about me that I'm married. So he'd be tzavridin anyway. We don't have to worry that a person is going to refrain from getting married because he's afraid that his suda, the expense of the wedding, would have been in vain. So basically, we have four svaras. Either it's a gzeira, otu, tanai b'nesuin. We don't want people to think that a tanai works b'nesuin. The second reason is a person doesn't want his bia to become a bia snus. The third reason is we don't want him to raid and ruin her nichsim alug by overtaxing and taking too many pairs and cutting too many things off the field. And the fourth thing is we don't want him to stop making an asuin because he's afraid that these costs to make the wedding party wouldn't have been worth it. So those are the four svaras why Ben Shammai holds that an asua cannot make meat. Gewaltig. The next restriction Ben Shammai said was bebal v'loy b'yovam. He could only make yibum on the husband. She could only make miyun on the husband. She cannot make yibum on the yovim. Amar Boishia. Zok Boishia. We have to help up. This is a little bit complex, and we have to focus. Amar Boishia. Mima enes l'mamoray ve'enim amamas l'zikas. Even Basil, who holds that she can make miyun to the yovim, she can't make miyun on the zika that she shouldn't require chalitza. No. She could only make miyun l'mamari if the brother-in-law made mimer normally on a regular Yevamos. If someone made mimer, he would have to give her a get if he wants to get rid of her. Here, the miyun will work for the mimer. But it doesn't mean she doesn't need chalitza. The einam amenes l'zikasai, the miyun does not help to eliminate the zika. Amar Reb Chisda my tamid Reb Oshia. Reb Chisda wants to explain why is it that the miyun will not work to take away the zika, because mimer the midaita, mimer cannot be done by karcha. Mimer is like kedushin, so she has to accept the kedushin. So mimer, which she had to be agreeable to accept, matzi akra, that she could be oiker with her miyun. But zika, the bal karcha, zika comes with her will or against her will. The zika comes, the Torah puts the zika on her. Therefore, the matzi akra, her miyun will not be able to undo the zika. For the Gemara, what type of svar is that, Reb Chisda? You're telling me something that happens, bal karcha, she has no ability to eliminate with her miyun? Very bia. What if the brother-in-law actually made yibum on her, the bal karcha? That works even against her will. We know that yibum works, even bal karcha of the Yevamos. Nevertheless, we know the halacha is umatzi akra. We know that she could make miyun because Rashi says shaloi zeitricha get lebiyosai. So if the Yovim actually did yibum on her, Basil holds that the miyun would work. So if the miyun would work even on something that's bal karcha, how can you use that svara to say that miyun doesn't work on the zika? Ella, bia u'maimer, bia and maimer, where the miyun works for the hookah of it. Who makes the bia? Who makes the maimer? The man. The man makes the maimer by making kedushin on her. He makes the bia by making the bia on her. So it's man-made. Something, a relationship, a bond that's man-made, matzi akra. That she could be oiker with her miyun. But zika derachmana ramala, the zika is not man-made. That the Torah places on her if her husband dies and there's no children. Therefore, loy matzi akra. So the svara of Rabbi Oishia, who says that the Miyun only works for the mimer, or even after Yibum is done for her second husband, that's because that's created by a man. Mashenk and Zika, which is created Minashamayim, Miyun wouldn't work for that. Ula argues on her Boishia, and Ula says, Mimayendis Afla Zikasa. He argues on her Boishia. Boishia said that you can't, Miyun does not work to be Mavatal Zika, and Chalitza would still be required. Ula says, no, Avada the Miyun works. And it's very important how the Miyun works. My timer, Nisua Kama Ka'akra. The Miyun is uprooting the original marriage. If there was no original marriage, there's no Zika. So she's not undoing something that's made from Shemaim, because she's not directly eliminating the Zika. She's eliminating the Kedushin, which was man-made. And Melech, there's no Kedushin to her first husband. Obviously, there's no Zika when he does. So that's how Machloikis. Rav Oishia holds that the Miyun doesn't work for the Zika, and Ula holds that the Miyun does work for the Zika. Eisvei Rav Alu. So Rav had a kasha to Ula. At the beginning of the Masechta, we said, Kol sheyechayli moin v'loy miyana terasa chayletus v'loy mishabemes. Let's talk about the very first Mishnah that says that if one of the women is usher to the other because of an Isser Kares, and the simplest example is Reuven and Shimon are brothers, and Reuven marries Shimon's daughter. So now Reuven is Shimon's son-in-law. And Reuven has other wives as well. So Reuven has Shimon's daughter as a wife, but he also has other wives. And Rechman L'San Reuven dies without children. So now Reuven's wives fall to Shimon, the Yibum, because Shimon's Reuven's brother. The problem is one of these wives, Shimon can't do Yibum on, because one of these wives is Shimon's daughter. So the Mishnah says, not only can Shimon not do Yibum on his daughter, who is Reuven's wife, Reuven's almana, he also cannot do Yibum with any of the other wives that Reuven has, even those would be technically mutter to him. So that's called tzara se'er. But what happened if Reuven wasn't married to I'm sorry? Chalitza also not correct. But what would happen if this daughter of Shimon that was married to Reuven was only married to him midrabanan, and she could still make Miyun? So you're going to ask me, how is it possible that she's married to the Rabbanan? Shimon's alive, right? We're talking about Shimon doing Yibum. Shimon has to still be alive. So if Shimon married his daughter Tana after Reuven, that's a marriage that's the Araisa. That's not a marriage that's subject to Miyun. Zokt Rashi and that Beis and Beis, it's possible that the father no longer has a right to marry her off. For instance, he sold her as an Amma at one point, and she became free. Or she got married and got divorced or something. So there the father could not marry her off with a Raisa. The father could only marry off with her Banan, and Miyun would work even on a marriage where her father married her off. Because her father at that point had lost his Daraisa, the right to be Makabal Kedushin for. Correct. So based on that, if Shimon's daughter fell to him to Yibum because she was married to Reuven and Reuven died without children, but she's the type of wife who could still make meal. So it says there, if this almana of Reuven, who happens to be Shimon's daughter, was a woman who could do meal, but had not yet made meal, there she doesn't pata tzarasa. There tzarasa chayletzes v'loy mishabemes. Her Torah does need chalitza. She's not pata from chalitza because she could. It's not a mamash marriage. She could technically make miyun and nullify the marriage. Frag the Gemara. Why do you say that? V'amai t'moyin hashta v'sakrinu l'nesuye kama v'tisyavim tzarasa. Why would you say that now her tzara is chayletes v'loy mishabemes? Tell her to do miyun now. If you hold like Ula that you could do miyun on your Yevama, let her do miyun right now to her father, who's her Yevama, let her do miyun right now. Now there's no more connection between her at all to the Yavim, and therefore let Shimon now do Yibum with one of the other wives of Shimon. Elamai, it must be that she cannot make miyun. It must be that Reb Oshi is right and that Ula is wrong. And for the Gemara, no. Tsaras erva shiny. The tsara of an erva is different. The Tani Rami by Yecheskel. What happens if she's miyun of a baal? What happens if a woman is married midrabanan to somebody and she did miyun? If she did miyun, it nullifies the marriage. Muteris la'aviv. She'd be allowed to go now and marry the father of the man who she made miyun on, because we don't look at it like she was ever married to him. The miyun totally wipes out the original marriage. However, biyoving asur la'aviv. What if a woman was married? She was a ketana and she was married, and her husband died, and now she's faced with yibum to her husband's brother, and then this ketana does yibum. There it'll be usher. Even if she doesn't mean, it'll be usher for her to marry the father. What's the difference? If she nullified the marriage, l'mafreya, the way Ula learns, what's the difference? What's the difference? Let her be able to marry the father. Everybody agrees. If she made miyun on a regular husband and everyone's still alive, she could go and marry the father of her husband. So obviously, the miyun eliminates the whole marriage with l'mafreya. So if that's the case, what's the difference if her husband dies? Why now can't she do miyun anymore? Why now? Why can't she go and marry the father? You see from here, alma b'shas nefila nirsh kekalose. What happens is, when her husband dies, it creates a matzav. It creates a matzav that, her husband died, and this man's daughter-in-law became an almana. Once she's labeled at the time of her husband's death as the almana of this man's son, so that sticks. That label sticks. And even if she does miyun later, it still sticks. That it's perceived. It's all midrabanan. She's perceived as being his daughter-in-law, and therefore will never let him get married. In other words, we look at the moment of the death of her husband. At the moment of the death of her husband, if she's going to be usher to her husband's father, then even though she does miyun later, and technically she's uprooted the marriage, she remains usher. So let me just finish the sentence. Hakanami, so too in this case, where Reuben was married to Shimon's daughter and Reuben died, even though she can do miyun now, and therefore you're arguing that all the other almanos of Reuben should be mutter to Shimon to do yibum. Nevertheless, since b'shas nefila nearest ketzaris pita, when Reuben died, all of these women looked like they were the tzara of Shimon's daughter, and therefore, even though Shimon's daughter could do miyun and nullify her marriage with Afreya, we won't let him do yibum anymore.
Students travels far further than Silver.
I hear. Okay, Gavalt. So once again, we have two shittas. We have the shita of Rabbi Yosy, who holds miyun does not work to break a zika, and we have the shita of Ula, who holds miyun does work to break a zika. Omar Rav. Rav said a halacha. Miyana bazeh asur lazeh. If she made miyun on one of the brothers, she's aser to all the other brothers. So let's just pick a typical example. There's 5 brothers: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar. And Reuben is married to a woman who's a ketana, and Reuben dies. Now there's Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar, who are all potential Yevamos. And she made miyun on Shimon. She made miyun on Shimon. She's also not only to Shimon, but she's also to all of the brothers. Midi the hava a balasket, just like a balasket. What's the halacha if there's 5 brothers who could do yibum, and one of the brothers went and gave her a get? He disqualifies everybody, midrabanan, of course. He disqualifies everybody from doing yibum. So making miyun on one of the husbands, on one of the potential yevamim, works just like a get and asers everybody from doing it. Balas a get, a woman who received a get from one of the yevamim, lav kiven the itzra lachad, itzra lachulu. The same way she became usher to this man who gave her the get, she also becomes usher to everybody. So that get shtares the zika with the rabbanon to everybody. Hachanami loishna. So too when she does miyun to one of the brothers, it shtares the zika to everybody. I'm sorry.
This second line, the balance get is the raya, and the mean doesn't.
It's a swur the same way by a balas get. We don't let her do yibum with anybody. So too, if she did miyun on one, we wouldn't let her. The Rabbuna won't let her do yibum with anybody. Well, Shmuel argues on Rav, and Shmuel says miyun of ezeh mutaris lazeh. If she made miyun on one brother, she could still do yibum to the other brother. V'loy dami lebalas get.
Being on the brother. Mean is not on the brother. Mean is on the husband. Was I married to the brother to the husband? How can I do mean on a brother?
So that's a very good question. That's a very good question. But these are all gzeres to Rabban. These are all their brothers. You're saying technically the mean, the way Ula explains it, that if miyun works, like according to Ula, the miyun is being oiked to kedusha l'mafreya, and then nobody has it. That's a very good question. But these are elder abundance. These are elder abundance.
Now, is really there was no marriage, right?
Correct.
It's only she has to say it. So
Let me ask you a question. If one of the brothers gives her a get, it does nothing at all. Yet the Rabbanim they say she can't do even not to him, not to anybody. It's also only with the Rabbanim. So Rav holds you have that same gzeira. You have that same gzeira if she did meal. Ushmul Omar mina bezeh mutaris lazeh, v'loy dami lebalas aget, and it's not doim to the balas aget. Why? Balas aget hu de ka'avad ba. The one brother was merachik, pushed away this woman, but Hacha here she's doing the pushing away. Hacha hika of the bay, she's doing the action on the man. The Umbra, she's saying loy ra'inabach, v'loy tzavinabach. I don't want you. If anybody has an article, what is the exact type of ra'inabach and tzavinabach? I don't want you. I don't desire you. I'm sorry?
By Yoel Moshe,
that's a target. Okay. So Bachu the loy reina. You, I don't want. One of the other brothers, Reina, I would want, and therefore we don't compare this to Balas. So once again, we have a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. If she made miyun on one of the potential Yevamim, if she's usher to all the Yevamim. According to Rav, she is, and according to Shmuel, she is. Rav Asi Amar, Rav Asi has a third position, and he says, miyun abazeh muteres afilu loy. If she made miyun only to one of the brothers, she's mutter even to marry that same brother. Zok Gemara, Rav Asi, who says this, that the miyun doesn't work at all. Basically, Rav Asi is saying the miyun doesn't work at all for the zika. Are we going to say that he holds like Rabbi Oishia, an Amar Aleph, who Rabbi Oishia taught us that miyun doesn't work at all for Yevama? Because that's what Rav Asi seems to be saying. Are we saying Rabbi Oishia Sfirla, the Amar Einim Ma'enes L'Zikasoi? Zok the Gemara, no. You don't have a raya that he holds like Rabbi Oishia. Because could be Bechad Yoveng, if there was only one brother to do Yibum, Hachanami de Matziyakra. Maybe Rabbi Asi would hold, in fact, that her miyun does work, and it'll be oiker zika. Rabbi Asi only says it if there's multiple brothers. Here we're speaking with multiple brothers, and she's only doing miyun to one of the brothers. There, you know why it doesn't work? The ein miyun lechatzi zika. Either the miyun works or it doesn't work, which is really what you were saying. If the miyun works, so then it took everything away. You can't have a half a miyun. So you don't have a raya. The Rabbi Asi holds like a Boishia. Maybe he holds that miyun does work for Zika, but it only works if it'll take away all the Zikas. But if it can't take away all the Zikas, then it won't work at all. Zok Gemara. Also, Ravin Omer Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan as follows: Miyana l'bazeh muteres lachem. If she made miyun on one brother, she's mutter to the other brothers. And the Oilam didn't agree with Rabbi Yochanan. So, Frank the Gemara, Man loy hoidulay. Who would have disagreed with Rabbi Yochanan? And we have three options of shittas based on what we've learned in this last shtickle. We have three options to understand why someone would have disagreed with Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Abaye, Rav. Abaye right away says, who's not going to be agreed to Rabbi Yochanan? Rav. Because what did Rav say? Rav said, once she's mine in one, she's also to everybody. Rabbi Yochanan said, Miyun al-bazeh muter slach. So it's possible that Rav is the person who's arguing on Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Amar, Rabbi Ishia. Rav says, no, it's Rabbi Ishia who's arguing. Because Rabbi Yochanan said, Miyun bazeh muter slachin, but she's still also to the person who she made Miyun on. According to Rabbi Ishia, the Miyun has no impact at all when it comes to a Zika. Well, Amrilo Rav Asi, or maybe it's Rav Asi who is arguing on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rav Asi said that if she was memayin to one, even to him it's not a good miyun, because ein miyun lechatzi zika. So there's three options of how to understand who the bar plukta of Rabbi Yochanan is, or maybe all three. Zok telek more about it. Beishami Orim b'fon. Beishami says you can only do miyun in front of the husband. If the husband's not around, you can't do miyun. Tani benut na brayso. Amulam Beisil Beishamai. Beisil told Beishamai, how could you say that you can't do miyun only if the husband's there? I'll show you there's a story. We actually allowed someone to do miyun even though the husband wasn't around. But like Pishoy Nagama, Pishoy, who was a camel driver, meaning he was a big rig. He drove a big rig. He was rarely home. He was always traveling. He was never around. And in fact, they allowed his wife to do miyun even though he was on the road trip. Bishami told Basil, you can't bring me a rye from Pishoy. Pishoy Nagamo, B'mida Kfusha, Modad. Since he used an upside down basket, meaning he didn't behave properly, Lefichach Moduduloi B'mida Kfusha. That's why they treated him unfairly. And they allowed the meal. What did he do wrong? Mitika Achol Peri, because he was ruining the payers. So therefore, we wanted to get her out of that marriage. Frank the Gemara, I don't understand. Shita Nusuhi, V'Amri Beis Shammai Nusulai Mamayna. We have another problem here. She must have been in a Nesua, because otherwise, why would he be eating pears? You don't eat pears from a woman who you only were Makadish. So obviously, she was in the Nesua. If she was in the Nesua, then besides the problem that you have, it was anything but fun of, Beis Shammai holds on the Nesua. You can't make Ibon on the Nesua. So Gemara, Trey Kirtei of the bed. Since he was a bad guy, they waived two things. A, they waived the issue that you cannot make Miyun Shalai B'Panav, and B, they waived the issue that a Nesua cannot do Yibum. I'm sorry, that a Nesua cannot do Miyun, because he was mafsed there. So the question is, how is it possible that they could allow that to happen? So Toysva says, Trey Kitri Abduba, he did two things wrong. Yerushalmi Parach, Yerushalmi asks, Matir and Erva Shaloi, but because he did an Avla, so like your Matir and Erva Lashuk, you're going to allow Miyun when Miyun is really not allowed? Umashani Reb Chisda had the Amra over Umiyana Minan Nesuin, the Shaloi B'Fanav, Al Datau de Beis Shammai Miyuna Miyun. Even Beis Shammai would agree that even though it's Shaloi B'Fanav, and even though it's Minan Nesuin, the Miyun will still be a Miyun. Vein Zukushik Al Kach, it's not so schwer. The Ikal Meimar, the Kiddushay Tana Rabbanon, the whole Kiddushin is Rabbanon, Mafkini Rabban the Kiddushin Minayu. They give him a knas. They give him a knas, even though normally this is something that wouldn't be allowed. Zok more weiter. Bishamay Rabban b'fnei bezin. Tanan Osam Hachalitza b'miyunin b'shloisha. Chalitza miyunin have to be with three, obviously in front of a bezin. Man Tana Amar Rabban Beishamai. This must be Beishamai because Beishamai was the one who said it has to be b'fnei bezin. Abai Amar Filut Heber Beis Hill. You could even say Beis Hill holds has to be three people. Ad kan loy kamer Beis Hill el v'leibin mumchin. When our mission says that Beis Hill holds you don't need bezin, means you don't need mumchin. Avo shloisha binan, you still need three people. It just doesn't have to be mumchin dayon. Ki the tanya b'shamay yomrim b'fnei bezin, the v'shalay yomrim b'fnei bezin, v'shalay b'fnei bezin. But the elu moedim should tzarich shloisha, but you still need three people. Rabbi Yosy Yehuda, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon, machshirim b'shnayim, they allowed even with two people. Rabbi Yosef bar Menyume, Rabbi Nachman halacha ka'osei azug. The halacha is like that zug. But what does that mean? That means I believe that means only b'di'evet, not l'chatchila. Beishamai Raimim Timoy. Beishamai says, let her do Miyun once again. Let's have a look. What does it say in the Mishnah? The Mishnah says that Omula Beishamai ain't b'nois Yisrael Hefker. You can't let him have multiple Miyunim. Elamama Enes, she makes Miyun right then and there. We don't let her get married again. We wait till she becomes a Gedoyla, and then she has to make Miyun again to see Nasi. So for Gemara, why do you need Miyun twice? She already made Miyun when she was a Ketana. After she did Miyun, we wait until she becomes an adult. She has to maintain the Miyun that I made. I still maintain that Miyun. I still don't want to be married to that first husband. Ula learns that no, there's two options. Either she can make a Miyun right away, and then she has to wait single until she's a Gedoyla, and then she get remarried. Or we'll allow her to make Miyun now and get married right away. Bishlam according to Ula, that's why it says because she's going to have to do an action. According to Shmuel's pshat, she just has to not be choizer from her meal. So the Mishnah should have said so kasha. No, it's fair, but that those are the two pshatim. Either it means she has to confirm that she still wants to maintain the meal, or it means she can get married but she can't get rid of the second husband. Zok more weiter. Ezoy.
Then I'm the Chazanish.
To wait till the mitzvah. Very nice. Very nice. Who is a ketana that needs to do Miyun? Kol sheshiu ima v'achel l'dait. That's any girl who her mother or her brother married her off with her will. What if she never wanted to marry this guy in the first place? Miyun is not even necessary. Rab Chanina ben Antignas Omer, Kol tinoikes she'eni yichayla lishmar kedusha, any tinoikes who cannot properly watch her kedushin, meaning she doesn't realize, she doesn't know that she's not allowed to be with anybody else. She doesn't know, she doesn't appreciate what marriage means. Ain't it tzricha. That doesn't even mean because that kedushin doesn't work at all. The Rabbanan didn't make the halacha of kedushin the Rabbanan for such a thing. Rabbi Elazar Omer, ein ma'aseh ketana klum. The ma'aseh ketana is nothing. Ela kamafuta, she's just like a mafuta. And Rashi says, like it says in it, like the Mishnah continues to say, Bas Yisrael a kohen. If she's a Bas Yisrael who married a kohen, since she's a ma'aseh ketana, it doesn't impact anything. She will not be able to take truma because she's married to this kohen. Bas kohen Yisrael, if she's a Bas kohen and they married her off with this kedushin d'Rabbanan to Yisrael, toichel b'truma, she could still eat the truma from her father's household. Anything that's holding her back from the man's side, that's like it's his wife. And for that, we're going to wait to the Gemara to explain what this is referring to. Okay, let's stop here, and we'll be Mamshech Be'ez Hashem tomorrow.